Hello everyone, Peaceful here, and welcome to Nightfall A-Z, the series where I go over every single Nightfall card, explain how the card works, and analyze its competitive viability and playability. Then, I will give the card a rating out of 5. Now, for those of you familiar with MetaZoo A-Z, this series will have had considerable changes from previously. Due to sets releasing every 3 months, and me balancing content with school, and just how long it takes to edit and make these videos, it made much more sense time-wise to group cards by aura type. So for Nightfall, there will be 11 videos, one for each aura type and neutral. This first episode, neutral. The first card up is Absorb Aura. Absorb Aura is a 0-cost neutral spell with a spellbook limit of 4. When contracted, it destroys an artifact that has an aura cost of 0. You then bookmark a page and generate one aura with the same aura type as the destroyed artifact. This card is a perfect answer or stepping stone to the aurifacts. There are two main situations in which this card can be used. First, you can use it to destroy your opponent's artifacts. This slows down their game, likely ruining their game plan, and it also replaces itself and slims down your deck. It will even ramp you on your own turn when used, essentially turning your first turn into your second turn. The second way this card can be used, and my preferred method, is to use it on your own aurifacts. Picture this scenario, which statistically isn't that unlikely. On your first turn, play an aura and an aurifact. Maybe play a turn 1 beastie or index. On your second turn, play a second aura, fatigue your aurifact for 2 aura, absorb aura your aurifact to draw another card and get another aura. This means on turn 2, you have 5 aura, 6 pages in chapter, even when you've contracted 4 pages, and have seen an extra card in your deck that you would not have seen otherwise. As you can see, Absorb Aura is a very powerful card when used, but what it lacks is when it cannot be used. There are some scenarios in which you will draw it, and neither you or your opponent has an aurifact that you can use it on. Now, what decks should use Absorb Aura? I believe that most decks shouldn't main deck them, unless your game plan is ramp, but most decks have 2 or 3 copies in the side deck, as they are a very good card in certain matchups where your opponent relies on aurifacts, like a Quad Quetz deck or multi-aura type decks. Absorb Aura is very powerful, but not always the most consistent, so in my opinion, Absorb Aura deserves a rating of 4 out of 5, placing it level with cards like Chaos Crystal, but sitting below the aurifacts. The second card is Ackler. Ackler is a 1 per spellbook neutral beastie caster that costs 4 neutral aura to contract. It has 70 life points and the fleet trait, meaning it enters the arena awakened. It also has plus 25 damage Terra boost from nighttime, meaning when nighttime Terra is active, its attacks do an additional 25 damage. And it has a plus 25 life point bonus from daytime, so when daytime Terra is active it has 95 LP. Ackler has a contract effect. When it is contracted, you choose either light or dark for this page's aura type. Lose nighttime if you choose light, lose daytime Terra if you choose dark. So, if you choose light when it enters the arena, you lose its nighttime Terra damage boost, and it also becomes a light page, so it deals plus 20 damage to dark pages. If you choose dark, you lose its daytime Terra boost, and it becomes a dark page, so it deals plus 20 damage to light and spirit pages. Ackler also has an attack called Sublimation. If it's a dark page, Sublimation does 70 damage and inflicts Scared, meaning the enemy page will have a chance of returning to its own chapter when it attacks. If it is a light page, Sublimation does 50 damage and makes a page or caster gain 20 life points, which could target itself. Ackler is an extremely versatile card. Not only can it make an instant impact with Fleet, but it can go in any deck and essentially become one of 2 cards. I would say in my opinion that the dark version is better, as Sublimation will do a total of 95 damage because of the Terra boost if you have nighttime, and that extra damage plus Scared is more valuable than a small amount of healing. In addition, if you are going against a light deck, Ackler can be an even more powerful beatdown beastie by dealing an additional 25. I wouldn't recommend main decking this beastie because in a deck that doesn't play nighttime or daytime, it is simply a 4-cost beastie with fleet and a pretty good attack, which simply isn't worth it over a more synergistic card in my opinion, especially for its higher aura cost. However, any decks without a daytime or nighttime Terra should still probably side deck this card, as it can be extremely helpful in overcoming any dark, light, or spirit decks you face. It only takes up 1 side deck slot, and the fact that it only costs neutral aura also makes it perfect for any deck running multiple aura types, as it will be much easier to contract Ackler in a Forest Flame deck than it would be a Piasa Bird or Bigfoot. Since Ackler is a powerful and versatile card that can fit into any side deck and be great against light, spirit, or dark decks, I'm giving it a 3.5 out of 5, placing it about level with cards like Chessie. Next up is Aura Prowess. It is a 0-costing spell with a spellbook limit of 4. You may only contract Aura Prowess if you control at least 2 basic aura pages of different aura types. When you contract Aura Prowess, you can search your spellbook for a basic aura page, reveal it, and place it into your chapter. So, it is clear that the deck Aura Prowess is made for is multi-aura decks. For those decks, it can be very good, because in multi-aura decks, you often have trouble getting the right amount of each aura type. Like, let's say you want to contract a Dampen in a Water Forest deck, but you're stuck with 2 Forest Aura instead of 1 Water Aura and 1 Forest Aura. Aura Prowess can help out in that situation. Aura Prowess is also great for deck thinning, because it essentially replaces itself with an aura page when you contract it, meaning you remove an extra aura from your spellbook when you contract it. And a spellbook with less aura means a higher probability that you draw your good cards, or your non-aura cards. When in your chapter, essentially treat Aura Prowess and an aura page. For this reason, when deck building, treat Aura Prowess copies as some of your 10-ish aura pages, not your 30th other pages. However, there is a drawback to Aura Prowess, which is you must already control 2 basic aura pages of different types. So, this means that you can contract it no earlier than turn 2, so on turn 1 it can be seen as a dead card. But this also doesn't help you in the worst of aura screw situations in which you can only have one of your 2 aura types. This is a balanced drawback though, as it is a powerful effect. So, Aura Prowess. A powerful 0-cost spell that helps with aura fixing and thins your deck, but is dead for 1 turn and won't work in some situations. Very powerful, but somewhat inconsistent. For these reasons I'm rating it a 3 out of 5. Fourth up is Boost Aura. Boost Aura is a 1-cost artifact with 25 life points and a spellbook limit of 2. When you contract it, you can lose 50 life points to have it enter Awakened. You can fatigue it and spend a certain amount of aura, and for every aura you spend, non-token beasties attacks do 5 additional damage until the end of turn. This means that it doesn't boost damage of spiderlings or dingbell tokens or other tokens. The first thing to note, you should almost always pay the life points to have it enter Awakened. It is not a smart idea to play Boost Aura before the turn you want to use it, because 25 life points makes it very susceptible to a plethora of attacks, such as Fleet Beasties or Fireball. When you want to use Boost Aura, which should generally be later game or even as your finisher, pay 1 aura, pay the life, and immediately use all the aura you have to boost the attacks of your beasties and swing in for victory. Boost Aura should be played in low to the ground, wide aggro decks. Low to the ground refers to decks with generally weaker beasties, and cheaper beasties, and wide referring to having lots of beasties. So a good example of the type of deck to put Boost Aura in is Tribal Boost Fearsome Critters, where you have lots of beasties out and lots of aura to spend with all your convert beasties. Another example would be Spirit Tribal, or Snowsnake Tribal, where you amass beasties with evasion and can use aura to swing in for unblockable lethal damage with Boost Aura. There is a second type of deck this card can go in, a ramp long-term deck, where you ramp a lot, control the game, and then get 1 or 2 powerful beasties with evasion out. Then, in the last few turns, you can use Boost Aura to boost their attacks and swing in for victory. For example, Boost Aura might work well in Earth ramp decks. However, 1 aura for 5 damage isn't generally that good of a ratio, and the fragility of this card makes it a one-time use. Also, for Fearsome Critter decks, the turn you would generally be able to use Boost Aura most effectively would already be a point when you've pretty much won the game. However, low-to-the-ground evasion decks still have a perfect slot for Boost Aura. So Boost Aura is a decent but not too powerful card, but it only works in a narrow amount of decks, so I'm rating it a 2 out of 5. Next up is Borne from the Earth, or as I will refer to it, BFTE. BFTE is a 1 aura costing spell with a spellbook limit of 2. When you contract it, each caster may search their spellbook for a Terra page, contract it, and shuffle their spellbook. Terra is contracted counterclockwise starting with the caster on your left. Then the next beast you contract costs 1 less aura for each Terra bonus it has active in the arena. First, it is important to note the drawback when you use BFTE. Your opponent also gains the advantage of getting a Terra of their choice. Now, how do you use BFTE? I would generally use this in decks that utilize Terra as a crucial part of their strategy, or for decks that want to run multiple Terra. Let me give an example, this example being the current competitive iteration of Frost decks. In my Frost deck, I run 2 different Terra, 1 copy of Snowing and 1 copy of Winter. All of my beasties significantly benefit from one of the 2. Now, it might seem strange to only have 1 copy of Important Terra, but with BFTE it essentially is like having 3 copies of each, because whenever I have a BFTE, I can use it to get either of my Important Terra. Usually, I'll get the Terra that I have a beastie in hand to utilize with, and that beastie also gets cheaper by 1. It is important to note that this spell costs 1 to contract, so it basically pays for itself, except in the example where the beastie you want to play already has a Terra boost in the arena, and you're using BFTE to get the other Terra, then you could even decrease the cost by 2, or potentially 3. So in like 90 to 95% of the situations in which you use Borne from the Earth, it's paying for itself, but in that very small percentage of times, you're actually gaining an aura advantage. So other decks that can use Borne from the Earth include Earth decks, Forest decks, Spirit decks, basically any deck that usually wants multiple Terra, or just any Terra out and wants to be more efficient and have more deck thinning. So essentially what Borne from the Earth does is it thins out your deck by taking up space of multiple Terra cards with 1 card, and can get any card from your spellbook when contracted, meaning you have a higher probability of drawing your best cards as it gets you a free Terra, which you can use to boost a certain beastie in your chapter. Of course, it does have a minor drawback of progressing your opponent's game plan as well by giving them a Terra. Overall, I believe BFT is a very powerful card, and I'm rating it at 3.5 out of 5. Next up is Caster Center MD, a 2 aura costing artifact humanoid with 60 life points and fleet. It has a power, Booster Shot, that removes an effect indicator on target BC or caster. For those of you that may not know, powers can be activated on your turn when you have priority, and outside of combat, and you need to fatigue the beastie or artifact with the power to use that power. So essentially, on the first turn you contract Caster Center, you can fatigue it to remove an effect indicator, and then once per turn after that you can do the same thing until it is destroyed. Important to note, I would not recommend main decking this card, as only a few spellbooks rely on effect indicators enough as a strategy to make sense for you to play Caster Center against it. However, if you believe it would be fitting based on the current meta, I would recommend side decking Caster Center. It is also important to note that it only removes one effect indicator per power activation, so it isn't a good solution to leveling Frogman, because that inflicts beasties with about 6 status effects. Here is a list of currently played decks that I could use Caster Center MD in from the sideboard to use against. Quetz, Boil Over, Forest Spiderling Poison, Frost Frozen Counter Control, or Gassy decks, which have Burn from Fireball and Sleep from Morpheus. These are certainly not all the decks that you should side deck them in against, just some of the more widespread and in-use decks. Expect in most matchups to only be able to use it once or twice before it gets destroyed, so it isn't always worth it to play. In conclusion, Caster Center MD is a card that should not be in the main deck unless there are strange circumstances, and will take up 1 or 2 slots in the side deck usually. It has its uses and can be good in those circumstances, but it isn't useful enough for me to rate it highly. For these reasons, I'm giving Caster Center MD a 2 out of 5. Next up, Destroy Aura, a 4 aura costing neutral spell that has a spellbook limit of 4. It can only be contracted with aura pages, so no earlier than turn 4 normally. And you and target caster each choose 1 aura page you each control, and you place both aura pages into your respective afterlives. Then each caster must choose a special aura page if able. First of all, important to note, special aura pages aren't actually in the game yet. There aren't any special aura pages, but we assume there will be some in the next few sets. And also important to note, you do not get to choose which aura page your opponent puts in their afterlife. They get to choose it. So this is a symmetrical effect, but it essentially costs you a turn to contract as well, and costs you a card in hand. So there could be a scenario where it's worth it if you're an Earth deck with lots of ramp and running Aura Destruction as your main strategy. Between 4 of Destroy Aura and the Slide Rock Bolter, you could potentially keep your opponent at bay. But even in the only deck this is likely to go in, it isn't very good. This isn't a hard ranking. Simply put, this is not a good card, with an effect that should frankly cost less than 4. I'm rating Destroy Aura a 0.5 out of 5. Next up, Destroy Terra. Unlike its counterpart Destroy Aura, this is actually a good card. Destroy Terra is a 0-costing spell with a spellbook limit of 2. When contracted, it sends an aura page into the afterlife. This card should not be main deck like many other of the neutral spells on this list, as there are some decks that simply don't use Terra or don't rely on them to the extent that would make Destroy Terra worthwhile. However, I would highly recommend side decking 2 copies of it, as there are many decks that this would be deadly against, such as Quetz, or a multi-aura deck running Borne from the Earth as well as one of Terra. Although this does cost a card to contract, it is well worth it for the effect, and I'm giving Destroy Terra a 3 out of 5. Next, Feign Death. Feign Death is an X costing spell with a spellbook limit of 2, and you can only contract it when a beastie you control is destroyed. The cost of the spell is equal to the cost of the destroyed beastie, and that beastie goes back into your chapter. Essentially what this means is you have to hold up that amount of aura for when you think the beastie will die, meaning that much less aura to spend on your turn, and then pay aura to save it, and then still have to pay aura again to contract it. However, you aren't expending a card since you lose Feign Death to get a beastie in your chapter, so you're still staying equal on card advantage, assuming your opponent also used a page to destroy your beastie. This is a high cost and a difficult task to actually utilize Feign Death, so it isn't for every deck, or even for every side deck. There are a few decks, however, that rely crucially on specific beasties that this would be worth using, or at least having in the side deck. Examples include Gassy decks, Loveland Lockdown decks, and funnily enough because of the artwork, Kinderhook Blob life point gain decks. In addition, the cheaper the beastie is that you are protecting, like Blob or Frogman, the less of an expense it is to use Feign Aura. But for Gassy, you're essentially spending 8 aura, and also losing out on an additional 4 potential aura to replay it. So, Feign Death is generally narrow in use and hard to actually utilize. Not far off from Caster Center MD, and in this case I'm giving it a 1.5 out of 5. Next up, one of my favorite new neutral cards, Index. It is a 1 aura costing spell with a spellbook limit of 2, and it has the contracting condition of being the only non-aura page you contracted this turn, meaning you can't contract a page and then contract Index, and you can't contract Index and then contract a page. This can be the only page besides an aura that you contract on that particular turn. When you contract Index, you search your spellbook for a beastie page, reveal it, and place it into a chapter. Based on the contracting condition, the optimal times to cast Index are in turn 1 or in the late game, and you generally don't want to run Index in a deck that wants to have 1-drop or Aurafact on turn 1, as that can often be a conflict of interest. So, what decks want Index? An example would be a deck with lots of powerful 1-ofs for specific situations. For example, Frost, which has Jack Frost, Wahila, Chanu, and Babe the Blue Ox. Just like Borne from the Earth makes one of your Terras seem like a 3-of, Index makes one of your 1-of beasties seem like a 3-of. So depending on your matchup and your situation, your Index can turn into a Wahila, Chanu, Babe, or Jack Frost. Also, like Borne from the Earth, it thins your deck, but actually in a negative way, since it takes out non-aura pages. So, using Index will slightly increase your chances of drawing aura pages, which is generally bad, but could be positive in some situations when you're aura screwed, or running a low amount of auras in your deck. Overall, Index is a very powerful card that can sometimes be a conflict of interest, but in the right deck list and with the right timing, you can use Index to simply leap over your opponent. Overall, I rate Index a 3.5 out of 5. Next, Land Tax. A 1-aura spell with 2 per spellbook limit, and deals 20 damage to an opposing page or caster for every Terra your opponent owns. First, it is pretty obvious that this is not a card for main decks, as it relies on your opponent having Terra. Now let's do some math. Take Fireball, a pretty well-known removal spell, 1 aura for 25 damage, and it inflicts burn. Fireball is generally viewed as an average card, not that really great, not really bad. Land Tax is significantly worse. It doesn't inflict a status effect, and to deal more than 25 damage, meaning to deal more than Fireball, your opponent needs to control at least 2 Terra pages, meaning it relies on not only your opponent having Terra in their spellbook, but relies on them drawing and playing them, and it also takes up 2 slots in your side deck. This means on many turns of the game, Land Tax would simply be dead. Simply put, Land Tax is a page with mediocre effect, with way too many hoops to jump through to make it decent. 0.5 out of 5. The 12th neutral card from Nightfall is New Beginnings, a 1-aura neutral spell with a spellbook limit of 12. Essentially, what this card does is it makes both players shuffle the chapters into their spellbooks, regardless of current chapter size, and then bookmark a new chapter of 7 pages. This is essentially the same as New Year's New Beginnings, except pages go back into the spellbook instead of into the cemetery. In my opinion, New Year's New Beginnings is significantly better. Although both are very powerful, here is why NYMB is better. Inherently, you will only get rid of your hand if you think that it is bad, or only have a few bad cards left and want to draw a new hand of better cards. So with NYMB, you are removing bad cards from your deck, meaning you will draw good cards. With New Beginnings, you are putting those bad cards back into your spellbook, so it isn't thinning your deck, and it's only increasing the chance that you'll draw those bad cards again. Another scenario in which you will want to contract one of these is if your opponent has lots of cards in hand, or you know they have contracted Index, or have some knowledge of them having good cards in hand that you want to get rid of. New Beginnings simply puts them back into their spellbook, meaning they can draw them again, while NYMB puts them in their cemetery. That essentially for most decks takes them out of contention for the rest of that game. So, those are 2 reasons that apply regardless of deck choice as to why NYMB is better, but for certain decks, one might be better than the other based on strategy. So here are examples in which you want to run New Beginnings over New Year's New Beginnings. If you're playing a deck that draws lots of cards like Water, and you're worried that you'll run out of cards, play New Beginnings instead of New Year's New Beginnings, as you're putting more cards back into your deck, so it'll take you much longer to run out of cards. However, counterexample, if you're playing a Gassy deck, you want to run New Year's New Beginnings, as you can dump your own spells into your cemetery, making it faster to win with Gassy. So, in conclusion, New Beginnings, along with New Year's New Beginnings, is an insanely powerful card, but in most scenarios, its counterpart is simply better. For these reasons, I'm rating it a 4.5 out of 5. The next neutral card from Nightfall is Potion Seller. Potion Seller is an artifact humanoid that costs 1 aura, has a spellbook limit of 2, and has Fleet, meaning it enters Awakened. It also has 10 life points. It has a power called Potion Shop, and essentially you start by paying 1 aura to return a potion that adds a stock counter. Next time you use it, it costs 2 aura, and then 3 aura, so on and so forth. Every time you use its power, it awakens, so it can be used equal to the amount of aura you have. However, there is a downside. While you can use its power on your turn, your opponent can use it on their turn. But it is in your advantage because of Fleet. So, contract it when you know you can use it enough to the point in which it will be too costly for it to be worthwhile to your opponent. Or play it on the turn you know you can use it to win. While you can recur any potion with Potion Seller, there is one main strategy that comes to mind, and a powerful combo at that. If you get a beastie that does lots of damage, like 100 plus damage, or even if you use Bloodlust or Power Up Red to make that beastie have even more damage, have a few Lightning in a Bottle in your hand, you can use Lightning in a Bottle to continuously attack your opponent with that beastie, and then use Potion Seller to spend your aura for that turn to recur Lightning in a Bottle. In this method, you should be able to get at least maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 Lightning in a Bottles off, even if you don't have 3 or 4 or 5 in your hand. This is a pretty easy way to get a one-turn kill, otherwise known as an OTK, where if you're dealing 200, 300, even 400 damage with each attack, and you're able to attack multiple times in one turn, you can pretty easily kill your opponent. The only other drawback of Potion Seller is that it only has 10 LP, so don't expect it to last more than one turn, and the 2 per spellbook limit means you can't always rely on it for your combo. Additionally, it is an artifact, not a beastie, so there's no way to tutor it with Index. Potion Seller is a powerful card in the right situation, but it is fragile, inconsistent, and can benefit your opponent. For this reason, I can't give it any higher than a 3 out of 5. The next card is Tribal Warcry, a 1 aura cost spell with a spellbook limit of 8 per spellbook and the equipment trait. A page with equipment means when you contract it, you attach it or place it underneath the page you are equipping it to, and that page gains the effects of the equipment. Tribal Warcry can be equipped to non-token beasties that do not have tribal boost. The equipped beastie gains plus 10 LP and its attacks deal plus 10 damage for every other beastie of the same tribe or name in the arena. The equipped beastie is considered to have tribal boost. So essentially, what Tribal Warcry does is it gives any beastie tribal boost, not just for its tribe, but also for its name. So, a few things to note drawback-wise. To use this page, you need to have a beastie out, so by itself it has minimal impact and can often be dead. It also is only really beneficial if you have multiple of that beastie out or multiple of that tribe out. This is likely only useful in the mid to latter stages of the game, and it is a dead card in the early game. It is fairly clear what types of decks this card goes into, and it is very similar to Boost Aura, wide and low to the ground decks with multiple of the same card or tribe. In a fearsome critter deck, you can attach this to your Lufferling or Arkansas Snipe. Important cards to use your strategy, but don't have the life points or attack to be useful in combat. This would also be useful in a Snow Snake deck, making one snake slightly harder to remove and dealing more damage, or in a Spirit deck, being able to boost a Ghost Deer, Spectral Moose, or Fou-Follet. Although it has a limit of 8 per spellbook, if you decide to play Tribal Warcry, I wouldn't recommend using any more than maybe 3 or 4. As opposed to Boost Aura, it also only affects one beastie, not all your beasties. Overall, this is a cheap card that when played has a beneficial effect, but is nothing insanely powerful or widely used, and it isn't always the most consistent card. 2 out of 5 for me. Last but certainly not least by a long shot, Tribe Tirade, a 3 aura spell with a spellbook limit of 3. When you contract it, you choose a beastie tribe or beastie name with 3 or more beasties in the arena. All beasties belong to that tribe or name lose all traits and effect text except for their attacks until end of turn. Now, there is an obvious application. When used against fearsome critter decks, it makes their beasties weak, removes Gumberoo's bounce, removes Roperite's convert. It essentially leaves them open for a turn. However, this doesn't have to be against tribal boost. You can also use it against any tribe or beastie name. For Quetch and Thunderbird, you can remove Flight and First Strike if they have more than 3 of those combined. For Snow Snake, you can remove its invisibility. For Spirit Tribal, you can remove their invasion being the Spirit trait. This has so much utility and can greatly help your chances of winning against any deck heavily relying on one beastie or one tribe. However, side deck 3 copies. Do not main deck them, as not every deck is reliant on one beastie or one tribe. Now, how should you strategically play Tribe Tirade? It doesn't board wipe, it simply leaves beasties vulnerable. So you want to Tribe Tirade when you have beasties in the arena to actually remove your opponent's board, or when you have a plethora of removal or even a board wipe in hand. So, Tribe Tirade shouldn't be main decked usually, and it doesn't always work. It even needs a particular state of play to be beneficial. But, when it works, it is an amazing card, and for me, most decks should be side decking at least 2 if not 3 Tribe Tirades. I give it a 4 out of 5. For the conclusion, I will review all of the ratings I've given this episode, in order of rating. Destroy Aura, 0.5 out of 5. Land Tax, 0.5 out of 5. Feign Death, 1.5 out of 5. Boost Aura, 2 out of 5. Caster Center MD, 2 out of 5. Tribal Warcry, 2 out of 5. Aura Prowess, 3 out of 5. Potion Seller, 3 out of 5. Adam Ackler, 3.5 out of 5. Borne from the Earth, 3.5 out of 5. Destroy Terra, 3.5 out of 5. Index, 3.5 out of 5. Absorb Aura, 4 out of 5. Tribe Tirade, 4 out of 5. New Beginnings, 4.5 out of 5. Thank you so much for watching, and please consider liking this video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe if you have not already subscribed. Also, these videos do take me a while to script and film, and I truly do believe that they are helpful, especially for new players. So if you wouldn't mind, I would ask you that you share these to any new players or players that you know that you believe would greatly benefit from this video. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.